We're going to start in 1 minute. If you have any comments, please make sure you fill out the comment card or the section to speak for the 3 minutes, because that'll be in the beginning of the session. Thank you. Are you guys ready? All right, we're going to go ahead and begin. Jim, do you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Since I just saw you. Yeah, Jim? Can we do verification of quorum?
Yes. Director Alex Cook,
Present.
Director Van Vliet,
Present.
Director Doherty,
Present.
Director Tim Cook is absent, President Griffiths,
Here.
4 present, 1 absent, quorum met.
Thank you. And we're going to move on to approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of approving the minutes for September 13th, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone like to abstain?
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't present.
All right, thank you.
3 in favor, 1 abstention, 1 absent, quorum met. I'm sorry, motion carried.
And now we're going to go on to public official comments. Darcy Burke, President Darcy Burke.
Good evening, President Griffiths, board members, staff, residents. First of all, I want to thank both Director Cook and President Griffiths for joining us on a tour last week. We covered quite a bit of technical information, as well as I think you got to see the vastness of the water district. My favorite fun fact is that we have enough pipe to go from here to Denver. So that's always something to remember that we get to replace on a regular and frequent basis. So thank you again for taking the time. I really appreciate it and your interest. I have really good news to share tonight. It's only taken me 3 years. No, we're not number 2 yet, but for the first time ever, we reduced our inefficient and excessive amounts of water use by 3% for inefficient and 4% by excessive. And luckily, the other 2 divisions actually went up. 1 and 5 and 3. So we're this much closer to being number 2. So I've never been able to report that we went down at all ever. So I'm just going to celebrate that for the moment and just thank everybody for making sure they don't waste the water. Just use what you need. I want to talk a little bit tonight about algae and weeds, because I know President Griffiths and I are getting a lot of phone calls, tagged on a lot of social media channels, and there's good news and bad news in that. The good news is the water's clearer, so it's healthier. So you have aquatic life, including plants that grow. From the water district's perspective, when it comes to weeds, it's actually something that's beneficial to the overall water quality and health of the lake. It also is habitat for fish. So I'm sure some of our fishermen are much happier that there are weeds there, but it actually is a natural filtration process. But I know they're annoying. I know they get caught in props. I know that when they come up to the encroached beach area of residents, people don't like their grandchildren or children playing in them. So I think what I'm going to ask everybody is a little patience. We have to work with a number of other entities when it comes to dealing with water quality in the lake, and specifically about algae, or even what we call something called total maximum daily load, which is the number of different types of phosphorus, nitrates, that type of thing that in the lake. And that's where I know Councilman Welty sits on LEJWA. We have one of our board members that sits on this organization that kind of comes from the watershed and looks at holistically. I have met with the general manager of the agency that oversees LEJWA, the Santa Ana Watershed Protection Agency, and just said what we've been doing for 20 years. And it's, in my personal opinion, unacceptable to the level that it's going. So there has to be new technology in 20 years. There has to be a new approach. There has to be new something. This gentleman is very new to his position, and it's only fair to give him some time to go back and learn what we have been doing, to look at the water quality reports, to maybe come back in a few months to just see if there's anything that one can be done. And also, most importantly, is there grant funding available to address it? Because I really, especially given our current economic situation, am very sensitive to adding that additional burden to our ratepayers for something that can be more aesthetic. I look at it as public health and safety. We don't want a hazardous algae bloom like Lake Elsinore's had for 3.5 weeks, and their lake is closed. We want to make sure that that's something that doesn't happen in Canyon Lake, but we also have to be very cognitive of the cost of fixing it. I guess the good news is this is first world problems. You know, we have water. We're in Southwest Florida right now. There's no sewer, there's no water, there's no electricity. So not that I'm trying to diminish people's experience of that. I'm just asking them for a little patience, why we can work out maybe some options long-term rather than Band-Aid fixes. The other thing is I'm available. I know Mayor Smith and I will have a breakfast coffee tomorrow at 7:30 at the Country Club. Right now, they're the first Wednesdays of every month, but the city has moved their meetings to the second Wednesday. So starting in November, we'll move our coffees to the second Wednesday too. I'm available on all social media channels. My phone number is probably out there more than the Maytag repairman. My email, if you have a question or concern, I promise you I will answer your call and I will call you back. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the board? All right, thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
your time, and the experience was phenomenal of the water, just looking at everything. And for those who don't know, we're not supposed to put our coffee grounds or eggshells in the garbage disposal. So, side note, that was interesting. It's a fun fact I didn't know, so
Thank you for that
thank you.
PSA.
I know, it was
Thank you
great.
very
Thank you
much.
so much. And now we have our city council member, Dale Welty. Welcome.
Welcome. I have an expert that preceded me that knew how to shut off the microphone. That's a good thing. And thank you, Darcy. LEJWA does treat the water in Canyon Lake Valley twice a year generally. And I believe they intended to have a scheduled event this month. So it changes with the weather but I believe we're going to do another round of alum treatment this month. Okay, the big news for the city is that we are going to have a State of City event on Thursday, October 27th. If you are interested in coming, please go onto the city website and submit your and request a ticket. So it starts at 5 o'clock. General admission tickets are $40, and we hope to see as many of you there as that can be. Okay. The other thing is that the big change that we made is we changed the meeting night for the city council. It typically was the first Wednesday of every month. We have now changed it to the second Wednesday of every month. So, so everyone who's thinking about going to our meeting tomorrow, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen Wednesday, October 12th at 6:30. As most of you may know, Larry Green has retired from the council and, or is retiring from the council, and he's moving out of state soon. The last regular session council meeting that he will attend at this time is going to be Wednesday, next Wednesday. So if anyone would like to say goodbye to Larry, please come on by and say goodbye. And that should do it.
Thank you very much for that, Councilmember Welty. I will say the State of the City was a lot of fun last year, but it's a great opportunity to celebrate with the city, all the accomplishments that they've made, and there's a lot. So I look forward to celebrating that with you towards the end of this month. All right, so for announcements, I have two. I just want to make sure that everyone has. It was our fall alum treatment was going to start. It's going to be between October 10th and October 14th. So if you want details on that, please go to the POA website. We've also talked about it in our newsletter. If you don't get our newsletter, please sign up for it on the POA website. When Vacation Park opened, we also mentioned that we're going to have a grand opening when all the equipment is in. We're hoping it's going to be done November. It might be in December. So I wanted to take this moment to remind everyone that we would like to have all prior board members that were involved in Vacation Park to celebrate with us. We want to make sure that everyone was involved, everyone who's on FPC that was a part of it, rec committee that was a part of it, all the groups that got together. I feel like our board gets to be the board that kicks the winning field goal, but as we know, there was a lot of play well before us. So we just want to make certain that everyone is there because this is a community project. All the heavy lifting was done by their prior boards. They took a lot of the hits when they had to, not had to, but they chose to fund and put a little bit more into capital improvement to make sure we can have this amazing and beautiful park. So there were members that weren't thrilled with them about that. So they took the punches for what we get to celebrate now. And if anyone doubts the foresight and what they did, please go to the park, watch the kids, young and old, playing on the pump track, and you will see it was a wonderful decision on their part and a lot of hard work by all the members involved. So I just want to make sure you keep that top of mind. That'll happen either November or December. So with that, we're going to go to member comments. As a reminder, each member gets to have 3 minutes. I'll have the timer. Are there any member comments?
Yes, we have 4. The first is Joe Washley.
Great, thank you.
Don't move as fast as usual. Joe Washley, 3716-433. I wanted to comment on the committee changes that you're talking about putting in. I think that it's not 1 year, it's not long enough. To me, it'd be just like we elect you for 1 year and you're gone. The person's just learning the job, et cetera. Now, why would you want to take a real good chair and have him or her have to leave after 1 year? I'm on 2 committees now, and I've been on other ones. And there are a lot of people, most of the people on these committees are retired people. And these people, a lot of them don't want to be the chair. They say, no, absolutely not. I won't be that. So that's another problem with it. You just cannot every year change that person around. If we have a bad chair, and that would be the only reason for that, the committee can always vote to get rid of this chair and come to the POA and say, look, Peter Smith is doing a crappy job. He's nasty to people. He's not there, whatever it may be. And we have decided we'd rather have John Jones as our chair, and he's willing to accept it. And the POA would probably go along with what the committee said. So I think that is a bad move. The only other thing is we have 10 committees. And I'll bet you anything that at least 5 of them currently have chairs that have been on a lot longer than a year, maybe even 2 years or 4 years, or whatever it is. So, I mean, I could name names, but I won't, no sense in doing that. So on that part of it, you know my feelings. On the part about an alternate that you want to change on that, that rule that you want to cross out was put in a few years ago when we had an alternate who was just so good, a little off, and he was the alternate and they had an opening. The committee found somebody that was really, really more qualified. And they tried to put this guy on and bypass the alternate. And the alternate went to the board and the crap hit the fan. And anyway, I really think that the rule we've got in place now is very fair. And one more thing I agree with is the resignation and the 4 months deal there. I think that is an excellent idea. That's it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your comments. That's helpful. Next.
Next is Joe Comation.
Good evening. Joe Comation, 3716-124. With Joe Washley, I agree and have concerns about the 2-year current rule, it's or policy, I guess it is, that is allowed for a chairman to serve in a committee. And as Joe mentioned, there are many committees that cannot get a replacement. So the chairman gracefully stays on. And I had experienced that years ago when I was on the Green Committee. And I chaired the committee and there was no one willing to step up. And so I wasn't going to abandon the position. I stayed on. And one of the things I think you need to remember is that committee members get renewed every year and approved every year. So if there is an issue, there's an opportunity there to correct the problem and not burden a committee with constant turnover if you can find someone to replace them. So I urge the board to reconsider that change. I'm also concerned about the decision of the board that was made beginning of this year term to restrict members from speaking to agenda items when they're open for board discussion. When you folks are dealing with your agenda item and discussing it amongst the board, the membership has been shut out of that. And I don't think that's fair. I've been a member in this community for over 30 years and attended a lot of board meetings, and I can never remember that policy being in place. And I don't see the benefit of it other than maybe cutting the meeting shorter. I don't know what the reason was for implementing that policy to begin with. With transparency a key word in all your campaigns, except Alex, but I'm sure he believes in transparency as a board member. I'm afraid that voting on an agenda item without allowing members to participate in the discussion at the time sends the wrong message. I understand that we can speak to agenda items at the beginning of the meeting, but when you have a full slate of agenda items, you've discussed 8, 10, 12 items. And to get down to that last item that someone spoke to an hour before, it kind of dilutes the impact of what they had to say. So I would like to see this board reconsider that decision to and open up discussions for the membership during agenda items. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Next is Steve Liebring.
Steve Liebring, 3719, Lot 415. I concur 100% with the two Joes on everything they said. Didn't think I'd say that in my retirement, but I'm here to speak regarding the issue of the proposed FEC charter. And I just want to point out that, this charter was just put together a few years back and it's been working really well from our side of things. Suddenly, without any discussion with the FPC, it's being rewritten and basically undoes a lot of the stuff that we added in. And so in the past, we've always been consulted and included in the formulation of the charter. So respectfully, I'm asking that you table that issue tonight, and we invite you to come to our FPC meeting next week, and we can go over the charter point by point and discuss any issues that the board is having or staff is having with our current role and our duties. We think our role and our duties are really helpful in getting the community input in to be heard on preserving and enhancing our amenities. And I just don't see any of the proposed changes as really being much to help that fashion. So I'm asking you to please vote no tonight on this charter. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Next.
Last, we have Dale Welty.
Yeah, I'd like to agree with the two Joes that came before me. The bigger problem with committee chairs is getting somebody to serve. I'm going to pick on somebody who was a chairman for a really long time, and that would be who? Alex Cook. Alex took my place as the chair of recreation, and he says, well, I'll do it for 2 years. I'll make the effort. And then he'd come to me and say, I only got 1 year left, right? and he reached out over and over and over again for someone to take his place, but nobody at the committee wanted it. And one of the problems was Alex was just a great committee chair. He listened to everybody, he took everyone's information, and there probably should have been a replacement, but when you don't have anyone to step up, somebody has to serve. So again, it's more a technical thing of, I could see, a rule such as every 2 years, the committee has to recommend someone, and if they don't recommend someone, then the board will take their place and do something. But the 1 year you don't have enough time to become a leader really in 1 year, and there's a leadership quality to this. Also on the FPC, there's a couple of changes that you're making. It says here that one of the first one I read is in cooperation with the general manager, they'll provide assistance in the standards for the maintenance of the CLPOA assets and amenities. That was really put forward by the board. The board really wanted the community to have a standard, and the board wrote that in for the FPC. I think they kind of do it anyway, even if you took it out, but that was not FPC driven or member driven. That was clearly board driven. You also changed the 5-year list of projects for consideration that used to be planned. To me, it's semantics. A plan submitted by the FPC is always for consideration. A plan, in my mind, is always a direction you head in. We can't predict the future in 3 weeks, much less 5 years. But the idea is that we give some focus to outer dates on what we want to accomplish. So it's not a surprise or a shock every year what we're going to do. Again, it's just semantics. If you want to go that way, that's good. But the plan was never intended to be a dictation to the board. It was always, recommendation. The other thing is I've been around for a while, but I think the direction, it says here on the other lines, you're going to change it to as directed by the general manager. I don't think the liaisons, I think it's their job to do the directing. in our organization, we have staff on one side, we have the board on the other, and they play kind of opposite roles. So we keep the ship going straight. And the committee is the committee of the board. It's not a committee of the staff. The committees work with the staff just like the board works with the staff. At the end of the day, in the governance we have, the committees are under the board, and the communication should not be scrambled, jumping from staff to board to staff to board. It should be a committee working for the board should really be taking the direction from the liaison. All the general manager has to do is call the liaison and say, could you do this? But I think in good governance, we should not be mixing and choosing. Am I up? I think you rigged your timer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. That one actually scared me on that. Okay, I saw Scott pop in. All right, thank you everyone for your comments. We're going to move to the consent agenda. Is there any items that board member would like to have pulled from the consent agenda? All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
4 in favor, 1 absent, motion carried.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on to board action items. First one is 8.1 committee policy revision. Harmony?
Yes, so every year in review of the current committee policy for all CLPOA committees, it has been requested to make several modifications for board review. The most significant changes would be to make a 1-year limitation for chairperson on each committee, removal of alternate committee members' probationary period, and to the resignation procedure. If approved, each committee will be requested to recommend a new chairperson if the current chair has served for at least 12 months for the November open session board meeting, where the annual roster of committee members will be reviewed by the board. It's recommended that the board of directors approve the revised committee policy as attached.
Thank you, Harmony. Is there a motion
So
to
moved.
approve? Oh, is there a second? I'll go ahead and second. And time for discussion.
So I have a question. And that is, this came from corporate, and so I'm not sure what the genesis of it was, but I was just curious as to why there's a proposal to drop it from 1 year, 2 years to 1 year. Can somebody provide clarification on why we're looking to do that?
From what I understand, that came up from prior discussions from the board about changing it from 1 year or from 2 years to 1 year. But certainly if you want to amend, or if anyone wants to amend the motion to keep it at 2 years, you can certainly do that.
If I can further comment, speaking from just my own experience on this board, as a new member of this board, I do agree with comments that were made that it does take sometimes a couple of years. And I understand from a committee member, I think a 1 year for a committee member is a good annually renewable kind of thing. But I think for a chairperson, there's additional responsibilities, and having that additional term would do it. I think unless there's an issue that I'm not aware of, we have the mechanisms in place to make changes as needed. And I think, at least any discussion that I've heard, is there's a desire to encourage more participation from more members, and I think that's a good thing. I think bringing new ideas and a diversity of opinion and perspective is always a good thing. But I think the ruling we have with 2 years for the chairperson permits that. So I would like to propose that we keep it at 2 years for the chairperson and 1 year for the, I meant it to say 1 year for committee members.
Any other comments on any of the other policy changes before we go to Greg? I just want to. All right, so we have a motion to amend the proposed change and keep it at 2 years for the
Second.
role of chair.
Second.
You're so good at that. Any other, so we have a second on that, a motion to amend. Any other discussion on?
Yeah, I just want to comment that as a board, we need to really make sure that these committees are adhering to the 2 years. I think 1 year is too short, but 2 years, I think that we need to push other committee members to step up because those are our next board members, hopefully in the future. So we need to make sure that we encourage them on these committees to every 2 years and, get in front of them to make sure they're putting a new chairperson in place.
If I can add to that, every good company has succession planning. I think if we encourage our committees to come up with, who are future succession candidates and so forth, and really requiring the committees to do that every year, I think is a good practice as well. So I concur with that comment.
And going back to Alex being a great example, as Dale pointed out, if you weren't on the board right now, you'd probably still be the chair of the rec committee for another 20 years. And no one would step up to replace you, even though you've asked for it. But now you have someone, and we'll talk about that in November, who's willing to chair that committee. One thing I just want to point out on the alternate committee member, and the reason why that was scratched out, when I read through that section, I realized, I don't remember in prior committees that we've ever addressed that. We've always appointed someone as alternate. We've never gone back 3 months later and say, we really want to keep you. Probably because we had excellent results with our alternates, and that's why it just seemed like there was no reason to keep it in there when I was reviewing everything. Any other discussion? Okay, so all in favor of approving the committee policy with the amendment of keeping it, the chairperson on for 2 years versus changing it to 1. All in favor of approving, say aye.
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 4 in favor, 1 absent, motion carried.
And thank you, members, for your comments and helping us with that. Next, we're going to go to the FPC charter revision, which is page 45. All right, so the goal is to create a streamlined committee charter that more concisely describes the committee's current purpose and function. The revised charter also recognizes that every year the makeup of the board can change. Considering this and varying economic headwinds, the board's project focus and funding priorities are also subject to change each year. And this also, just side note, also includes other committees involved, a little bit more involved in the direction. So my recommendation is that the board approve the new facility planning committee charter. Is there a motion?
I would like to motion this to table it, so more of the FPC can dig into this a little more and just make sure we're covering all our bases and it's very clear what the overall goal of what this is. Because I think there's some misnomers of what we're trying to do and trying to clean this up a little bit.
Is there a second to the motion to table?
Second.
All right, any discussion on that? Actually, there's no discussion needed on the table. All in favor of approving the motion to table this topic so more discussion can happen with FPC, and we'll bring it back maybe next month or the following month, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
4 in favor, 1 absent, motion carried.
Moving on to 8.3, Outrigger Park South presentation. And this is with Director Doherty.
I'll just read this, self-explanatory. Several months ago, the newly formed Canyon Lake Garden Club resurrected the idea of putting the undeveloped POA land, known commonly as Outrigger Park South, to good use. One of those things being a place for a community garden. There are many active gardeners in Canyon Lake, and many residents own lots that have little or no space for gardening, like mine. During the past several months, the Garden Club has been working with FPC to come up with ideas for the park, ideas that would not only beautify the area, but ideas other than purely gardening ideas, that is, amenities that would benefit and attract the entire community, including but not limited to a walking path that would extend from Canyon Lake Drive north through the current Outrigger Park and south again through Evans Park and back to Canyon Lake Drive, about 1.2 miles in length. FPC and one or two members of the Garden Club would like the opportunity to make a presentation with PowerPoint slides illustrating to the board the wide range of amenities and improvements the park could become in the future. Somewhere in here, it talks, at the bottom, it talks about a presentation next month to this board in open session, not to exceed a half an hour. I'd like to amend that to 15 minutes. I don't think we need a half an hour.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion, but I'd also like to have a discussion if we could.
Yeah. Oh, it's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, now we're here for discussion.
Greg, a couple of questions on this. Has the, I think it's, I mean, always welcome input from the community. I think that's a good thing. And it's talking about Outrigger South as a specific implementation. Has the club considered other, or will the presentation include evaluation of other potential locations and also include potential cost impacts or projections?
I would say that cost impacts have not been addressed yet. We're in the conceptual stage. I learned today, actually from Alex, that prior to my involvement, two other locations have been considered. Evans Park North, I think that's commonly called, that little square area up there, and part of Sierra Park have also been considered in the past before my involvement. So there you go.
Any other discussion from, all right, so I have some comments on that, and I am concerned about, and so I would want to have this addressed, certainly the developing a park that currently doesn't use water and the impact of that, especially when we are in a drought and we are the #1 water users. So that is a concern. Some of the things that I would want in the presentation, if the board chooses to have this, is the cost and the cost of with digging for irrigation, new electrical systems that would need to go in place for drip lines, how they look. So overall costs on that. There could be an opportunity for grants if we went to those areas that already have existing sprinkler systems. So comparing the cost between a whole new adventure at Outrigger Park versus using some of the existing green areas as mentioned prior. If we were to build a community garden, it's important that the people in the club know that all members, just not the garden club, would have the opportunity to have a garden bed, and that would have to be done via lottery. I'd like to know what their proposed fees are for these garden beds, help us understand what will be the increase in operational costs, which will then turn into an increase in dues to the POA members to have this park. We're going to have additional possibility of additional staff would be needed in operations to care for another park if we do the big one at Outrigger. So again, cost of water, electricity, security cameras, patrol, landscape contracts, liability insurance, cost of managing and billing for the members who actually have the bed. And some of the stuff in the walking paths, there are existing walking paths. They talked about even creating an area for beach volleyball. We currently have multiple beach volleyball areas. So is there a need, and that would be coming from rec as well, understanding is there really a need for that? There's talk about building a climbing wall with ropes, maybe having climbing boulders. I'm curious what the cost of liability insurance would be, the cost of the equipment. Talks about an area for a waterfall, and there's cost to all of that. So I'm going to keep talking about cost and cost and cost and the needs for this, and mainly because there are beautiful ideas that come from everyone, quite frankly, and I think a garden would be beautiful, but I need to weigh that personally against the cost to operate it and the cost to build. There's no guarantee that this board or future boards are going to continue to fund the CIP at the level that it's at. So I just have a lot of different questions that I hope would be addressed in there. Some of the other things they were talking about, potentially fruit trees, or even when there is a garden for the neighbors that live nearby, if that brings in pests and rats, how are we going to control that? How are we going to protect those individuals or those households that are nearby? So again, there's just a lot more. I'm not going to inundate, but those are my concerns that were just off the top of my head that I would want the presentation to address. Any other discussion?
No, I think those are all good comments, and given that we'd like to see it include some of those matters, I think maybe we do want to make it 30 minutes. There's a lot to be addressed.
All right, so I'm going to see, now I'll call for a motion and a second. All in favor of having FPC provide a presentation on our Outrigger Park South, say aye.
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 Four
I'm
in
gonna-
favor, one
Actually,
absent. I'm sorry.
I'll oppose it for now. So 3 in favor.
3 in favor, 1 opposed, 1 absent. Motion carried.
All right, and now we're going to go to 8.4, Finance Committee member appointment. Susan?
Good evening. The Finance Committee has met and elected a new chairperson per the current committee charter guidelines. The Finance Committee is recommending that the board approve Claude Beauchamp to be the new Finance Committee chair.
Thank you, Susan. Is there a motion to?
So moved.
Move second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor of appointing Claude Beauchamp as a new Finance Committee Chair, say aye.
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
any opposed?
4 in favor, 1 absent. Motion carried.
Thank you, Susan. Now we're going to move on to 8.5, 28-day reading, revised rule PC 5.10, driveways. Ms. Cheryl?
Good evening. The current rule of PC 5.10 for driveways needed or required some clarification on the blocking of the front view of the home. So to improve the understanding of PC 5.10, the committee felt it necessary to revise the rule to include information on additional parking. The additional parking on the opposite side of the existing driveway. The committee is including the criteria the committee would then use for the use of additional parking and the approval process. The sentence in red line indicated that additional parking is being requested is shall not obstruct the front view of the home. For members that want to install additional perpendicular parking on the opposite side of their current driveway, there must be at least 8 feet between the side of the home and the property line. And the plan must meet the 1/3 landscape requirements and a minimum of 18 feet between the curb cuts. So if you look at the red line version, really what they're adding here is those clarifications, not to obstruct the front view of the home. And then for members that want to install the additional perpendicular parking on the opposite side of the property away from the driveway, there must be at least 8 feet between the side of the home and the property line. This is to allow for a space for a car, a boat, or an RV to park without having to block the front view. So it's recommended the Board of Directors approve the rule revision for a 28-day reading for PC 5.10 driveways as written.
And we're not going to make you read the revised rule, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry?
I said we're not going to make you read the entire revised rule. All right, is there a motion on this?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, great. All in favor of approving the 28-day read to PC 5.10, say aye.
Aye.
4 in favor, 1 absent, motion carried.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. And I just have to say this because Tim's not here and he would say it if he was. You guys are the hardest working committee with the most hours put in, and it's insane. So thank you. Now we're going to move on to Amanda. This is another 28-day read. It's a new rule, PK 2.10, player rotation, and PK 2.11, guests must be accompanied by a member.
I'm gonna get comfy because I have like 7 more rules after this. But this rule is essentially being proposed to help match some of the guidelines that are currently posted at the pickleball courts. The sport in general has seen a lot of growth in the last few years, and current members are experiencing difficulty securing courts due to the high volume of non-members that play at the courts. They're seeing that the prime member or the responsible member isn't present and their guests are just utilizing the court and they don't follow the guidelines, making it difficult for members to play. So there currently aren't any rules on this now. And so the pickleball club, or a few members from the club, met with our rules review committee and proposed PK 2.10, which would read no player or team shall play more than 2 games in a row. And also PK 2.11, that all guests must be accompanied by a member carrying a CLPOA card at all times. Guests are defined as any individual who does not have a CLPOA card, and that no more than 3 guests per tract and lot are allowed to use the courts at any time. So it's recommended that the board approve the new addition of PK 2.10 and 2.11 as attached.
Thank you, Amanda. Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I just want
Yes.
to point out on this that, sorry, Greg. This was the initial member pickleball players that came to the committees requesting some help here. There seemed to be, we have some of the best courts within about 20-mile range to us. So everybody knows now, and people are coming out and wanting to play at our courts at all times of the day. Sometimes, carloads of 4 people that are being called into the gates. And when, a member, we need to make sure we're protecting our members' amenities before we protect guests' amenities. So that's where this came from. I just want to make sure it's not a rule where we're just pulling out of the air and putting it on the agenda.
Yes, I'd like to discuss and then make a motion to slightly amend the first rule, PK 2.10. What it currently reads is no player or team shall play more than 2 games in a row. I'd like to add 5 words to that. Let me read the whole thing in context. No player or team shall play more than 2 games in a row, comma, when people are waiting to play. Now that may seem obvious, intuitive into the first part of the rule, but just for clarity and only for clarity, I'd like to propose that we add that phrase, when people are waiting to play. If no one's waiting to play, then there's no reason for the rule. So can I move that, make a motion for that?
Make a motion to amend.
To amend, as discussed.
All right, so can we get, or is there a second on the motion to amend PK 2.10, adding when people are waiting to play? Is there a second?
I'll second it. I also have some additional questions, but I'll second that. I agree with that comment that, I mean,
Okay,
if there's no one there, you can play as many games as you want. I mean, especially at 2:00 in the afternoon, right, when it's real hot. A couple of and these are just questions, so there's no agenda or intent here. One is enforcement. What's the enforcement? When we create new rules, I think we need to take into account enforcement. And so in this case, what is the enforcement mechanism? If there's a violation occurring, the people who are objecting should do what?
So like a lot of our other unstaffed common areas or parks, it would be mostly self-policing. If there was an issue, anyone there would be able to call community patrol and then they would report to enforce the rules.
So members are not to enforce the rules. Correct. Thank you for that clarification, which is good. The other question I have on 2.11, one is, are we requiring all members when they're playing to carry their POA cards with them?
Yes, so there currently is another rule that if you're on any common area, you're supposed to already have your POA card. So we want to encourage members to carry their POA card, especially as more and more locations potentially will have POA card readers. So we tried to write this, the committee, I should say, to mimic what we require at the pool. Kind of just foreseeing that that verbiage is going to change with other amenities in the future.
Great, thanks. And then the last question on this is, and I commend the Rules Committee for doing this and the pickleball club members who came forward to do that if this has become an issue. Sounds like it's an issue primarily on the pickleball courts. And I guess the only question I've got, when we create new rules is like consistency. Should this be a rule or should we consider this rule for all of our courts? And if we don't I don't need to amend it now, but maybe it's something we have the Rules Committee evaluate. On the tennis courts and basketball courts, I don't believe it's an issue. But from a consistency standpoint, should that be considered with the Rules Committee?
So that actually came up at our meeting, and I think the committee and Alex and everyone kind of agreed that we would treat this right now as a case-by-case basis. The requirements for the various amenities are different. Like, for example, the campground, a lot of Prime members aren't there with their guests. So I think right now it'll be case-by-case unless an issue is presented.
I'm done, thanks.
But I do like where you're going about the tennis courts and requiring a Prime member to be there, something that we may want to consider in the future if things are getting abused. The one thing I just want to add, because I've been talking about this for a long time, and now we just got some costs on our prior board, we've been discussing it, is about having the card readers at the tennis courts and pickleball courts for this very reason, but also to protect the court. So that way, if kids wanted to go in there and use it for to ride their to ride their skateboards on tennis courts and pickleball courts, we would at least know who they were because they had to swipe it. Unfortunately, the cost, this is something that we're going to have to look out maybe for the future, but the cost is going to be anywhere from $175,000 to $200,000. Because in those places, you have to dig trenches at every single entry point. You have Wi-Fi issues. So there's a lot more than just putting on a card reader, unfortunately. So I appreciate that the Rules Committee put this together so quickly. I appreciate the pickleball club and their leaders, if you will, coming in and giving some great insight on how to create this rule. So that's my point. So with that is what, you're good? All right. All in favor of I'm going to go one by one since we have a revision. All in favor of approving as amended 2.10 on player rotation as amended, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
4 in favor, 1 absent, motion carried.
All right. And then PK 2.11. All in favor of approving the new rules, say aye.
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 4 in favor, 1 absent, motion carried.
And back to Amanda.
This is another 28-day reading regarding our new pump track. So Community Patrol and staff have been noticing that many members there are propping open the entrance gate, which basically allows it to be a free-for-all. So we are proposing this rule to basically allow the association to enforce usage of the POA card reader that was recently installed and to discourage members from leaving the gate open for anyone who wishes to use the track. We really want to make sure that people are following the proper registration process. So this rule, PT 1.12, would read that the entry gate shall not be propped or intentionally left open by any member with a fine of $50. It's recommended that the Board of Directors approve this rule, PT 1.12, as attached.
Thank you, Amanda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? I'm going to add one thing, and I think of Greg because I'm going to talk about liability insurance for a moment. The reason why we have this there is everyone who goes on our pump track has already signed the release. So the POA, which is all of us, we don't get sued by someone who got on the track without signing that release. So if we leave that propped open and you think you might be helping a friend, or as a parent's there, they think, oh, it's okay for that kid, just know that if something were to happen and we get sued, not only do we have to pay for that potentially, but we could also potentially lose our liability insurance coverage. And if we don't have coverage, we may not open the pump track because we don't want to put the members at risk any longer. So this is really important for all members to adhere to, so we can continue to have the pump track open and make sure the kids have a fun place to go. All right, all in favor of approving the.
I have one
Oh,
thing to say,
go.
ask, sorry. That's all right, good. How are we going to police this? I mean, do the cameras going to pick it up and see who didn't put their card in? I mean, we can see who's going in and using the card, but we can't see who's not.
So Community Patrol monitors those cameras pretty frequently throughout the day. And so just by doing that, they've noticed people propping them open. So we'd be able to review footage and hopefully identify a decal number or recognize them in some way, or rely on other members reporting it to us. So it's as foolproof, I think, as it can be. But we're hoping that it at least adds a little more bite to something that doesn't even exist right now at all.
And I want to say, every time I've gone up to the pump track, it's about 6 or 7 times, the gate's been propped open with a big rock. So nobody's monitoring, so everybody's just going in. So I just want to make sure that we can actually see who's the culprit.
I think this is like the first step to, hopefully identifying these people and just discouraging the members. Maybe there'll be those kids that see that there's a fine and they don't want to get in trouble, and so they stop propping it open.
And to that end, we may want to, the cameras are good for forensic, finding out who did it subsequently, but it might be worthwhile to add to our community patrol a more regular in-person pass through there when they do their checks.
Yes, we've actually requested that since the soft opening. So typically Community Patrol will check all of our parks once or twice per shift, but we've asked them to pay closer attention to the pump track. So they're patrolling that several times each shift. And then of course, locking it up at the end of the night.
Would it be wise to post a sign if this passes?
Yeah, we might have to amend our sign. We might have to amend our sign that's currently there.
But I think that's a good warning too. Do you have that on there, or even a special little sign that says you prop it open, it's going to cost you $100? I think the first time the parent gets that citation in the mail, things might change. All right, any more discussion? Alex, you're good. All right, all in favor of approving the 28-day read of PT 1.12? Say aye.
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 All right, aye.
4 in favor, 1 absent, motion carried.
Amanda again, 8.8.
So this next rule is another one that was proposed by a few members at the Equestrian Center, and they brought it for review to the Rules Committee at their last meeting in September. Geez, we're in October. So several members at the Equestrian Center suggested essentially to allow owners and their horses to utilize all of the arenas that are there. I think there are 5 or 6 of them. Currently, the rule limits them to only use a few arenas. And the reason this poses a problem for some of these owners and their horses is that all of the horses have different requirements health-wise. Some of them have poor bone health, or they might be older, and so they really need to be walked on a certain type of terrain. And all of our arenas have different footing and terrain in them. So again, this was proposed at last month's Rules Committee meeting. And the revised rule, if you look where it has been redlined, we're really just proposing that hand walking horses, so you're not actually riding the horse, is permitted in all of the arenas, but only if those arenas are not currently being utilized by active riders. So priority is still being given to those who are riding their horse. And should a horse and its rider enter the arenas while someone else is hand walking the horse, the hand walker and the horse would exit again so the rider can have priority. So this was also ran by some of our operations staff who's more familiar with the equestrian center and horses, and it was really determined that some of the arenas are pretty underutilized, so it didn't seem like this is really going to cause any problem or uproar. So it's being recommended that the Board of Directors approve EC 3.2 as attached.
Thank you, Amanda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? No? All right, all in favor of approving the revised rule for horses are to be under saddle, say aye.
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 Four in favor, one absent, motion carried.
Thank you, Harmony. Going on to 8.9, Amanda.
We're halfway there, everybody. The rest of these are just approvals. So this is from last month's meeting to approve SP 2.4. Just as a reminder, this clarifies that members need to have a POA card when they're going to the pool. Otherwise, you'll be considered a guest. So it's being recommended that the Board of Directors approve to revise Rule SP 2.4 as attached.
Thank you, Amanda. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor of approving revised rule SP 2.4, pool use limited to 6 guests, say aye.
Aye.
Four in favor, one absent, motion carried.
Thank you, Harmony. 8.10, 8.10.
This is another approval for 2 pump track rules from last month, PT 1.3 and PT 1.4. And these rules were really just proposed to be consistent with the signage that we have posted there regarding members who are 12 years of age and under, and then the maximum speed limit there. So it's being recommended that the Board of Directors approve PT 1.3 and PT 1.4 as attached.
Thank you, Amanda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. One is on PT 1.3. I believe it's a typo because it says children under 12 years of age and under 12. I think you can just strike the red line in there. Because if you're under 12 years of age, I think you're under 12 in most cases. I think it's just a mistake. But the question I've got, so a question is regarding these make it consistent with our insurance policy. Is that what the genesis of this is? Okay, and does the insurance policy say it has to be under 5 miles per hour or 5 miles an hour?
I can speak to that, Bill. It does not. Actually, the requirements that are referred to here were a collaboration of the POA staff and our brokers staff as to, safety at the pump track. But there's nothing in the insurance policy, and God forbid there would be, that requires all of those requirements as written.
I guess the question I've got is, again, enforcement, how do you enforce a 5-mile-an-hour speed limit? I've seen, it's impressive what, again, great job to the POA for creating a super facility, and watching the kids there is impressive. And I can see a safety issue. There's some older kids who are very good at jumping, and it's very impressive to watch. And I think there's some younger ones sometimes that get intimidated by that. But the 5-mile-an-hour thing, I'm concerned about how we enforce that. So that's a question and concern, I guess, that I've got.
Yeah, go ahead. That's a great question.
It really would just be at the discretion of community patrol if they feel that they're exceeding 5 miles an hour and causing a safety issue.
So if the concern, so rather than it being 5 miles an hour, if the concern is safety, maybe we need to have certain times when, younger ones are allowed versus older ones. I just don't know how we put a rule in place that we can't enforce. And that's my, I guess, my question and concern on that, on PT 1.4.
I think it's similar to like our 5 mile per hour rule we have in the East Bay. Our Marine Patrol, they don't have speed radar to, clock someone on their boat, but, they can see if they're pushing water or plowing water or causing a safety concern to other boaters, they'll tell them to slow down. So I think it's to mimic that same spirit.
Yeah, my answer would be, if you don't have a rule on the books, then you can't enforce anything. If someone's blatantly violating a 5-mile-an-hour thing, we're going to talk about approving a rule that was up for 28-day reading months and months ago, the 6,000-pound boat rule. The spirit of that rule is to set a ceiling where we have none. And so maybe the ceiling should be 10 miles an hour. And the question to me isn't, are we going to enforce that or impose on it? Although you're going 6 miles an hour, you're getting a citation. It's not about that. It's about having a ceiling where there isn't any. So setting something as a limit, and it's the same thing for the boat rule, for me anyway.
Yeah, I'm not sure 5 miles an hour is the right number. I mean, being over there, and some of the older kids are going well over 5 miles an hour now. So again, policing it and so forth, but maybe the rule should basically be reckless, bike riding, or some, not in control, or some burst speed. Something there just to kind of, if somebody is reckless and abandoned it and, basically running over little kids, that we have somewhere to pull the reins in.
I do believe there is a current rule already that reads about reckless riding or behavior. So this would be in addition to that.
So with that, just to remind the board, if you want to, there's options. You can motion to amend if you want to change the miles per hour. You can motion to table that particular rule and have it go back to the Rules Committee. So if there's any discussion on that.
I hear your comment, Eric, and that is we need to have something in place. So I certainly.
I just want to add, I don't want to interrupt you, but Sean, our attorneys also vetted all of the rules. And so there was an ongoing conversation for months between the POA, our legal team, and our brokers. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and say we didn't make that up. I'm not sure where it came from right this second, but I think there should be a limit, and maybe it's 10, but Sean's looking now to see if, I think they told us that's what they wanted, to be honest, but I don't know for sure.
So maybe a counter proposal is, again, I think this is, we certainly need to do this to be consistent with our insurance. So I think having some rules in there is appropriate, and having some limit. I guess I'd be in favor of supporting it, and maybe having someone, rules committee or someone, take a look at what is a rules or legal or insurance, or somebody give us some sort of, like we are with the boat weight and wakes, give us some other interpretation on what a give us more rationale on what the limit should be and why. Well, no, my recommendation would be let's go forward with the proposal because I think there's a lot of other things in here that need to be covered and maybe give a recommendation to a committee or staff or someone to come back with more detail on what the specific justification for the specific limit.
If we may, we were able to confirm it was part of that insurance documentation.
And just a reminder, we can always change rules in the future. So if we end up changing that to 10 miles per hour or 50 miles per hour, which would be god awful, but we can change the rules in the future. All right, any more discussion? Right, so I'm going to call for a vote. I'm going to separate it out just to be clear. So all in favor of approving PT 1.3, say aye.
As amended, yes.
As amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
4 in favor, 1 absent, motion carried.
All right. And PT 1.4, all in favor of approving, say aye.
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 No.
3 in favor, 1 against, 1 absent, motion carried.
Thank you. And Amanda.
On that last item, again, I would like to come back with some information from from staff or insurance or someone on justification behind
Right.
a proper
Yeah, we have that down, right?
limit.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
No, making sure or just getting more clarification, where did this come from, the 5 miles per
Oh,
hour?
yes, we did
Yeah,
actually
so
just-
he's already working on that.
Yes, we just confirmed.
Oh,
Well, it was stated on the application when we got the insurance.
To help elaborate, we were trying to make sure we matched what we provided to insurance and also had vetted so that there were no disagreements.
thank you, Harmony. Thank you, Sean. All right, Amanda.
Okay, last one is an approval. This was actually from a couple months ago to revise Rule LM 7.2, which talks about the length limit for boats and is adding a weight limit of 6,000 pounds. And just to be clear, as of this meeting, if this is approved, this would grandfather in any current boats that exceed 6,000 pounds. So it is recommended that the Board of Directors approve LM 7.2 as attached.
All right, thank you, Amanda. Is there a motion?
Motion?
Do you have a second?
Second.
All right, discussion?
Yeah, I just learned a lot of history about this that I did not know in the past few days. And my understanding of this is it came up several months ago before my time. And I guess it somehow dropped between the cracks. And it's just recently come back as an active item. The thing that concerns me is not the restrictions on the length. Those seem reasonable to me. And also historical. I believe there have been 21.6 for quite some time. What does concern me is this weight thing. And, we have a small lake. I don't think anybody will dispute that. And these boats are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, as I understand what's before us tonight, the 6,000 pound limit is supposed to be what's called a placeholder or a stopgap measure until we get the report from a consultant that we hired in March that's going to speak to this very issue about the weight of these boats in our lake. And that report is due to be received next month. So I'm wondering why don't we just wait a month for the report to come in and then skip this whole placeholder activity we're trying to do tonight and just wait for the report in November and put the final rule in place. The fact is that the boating season's over, right? So people are probably running out buying 7,000 pound boats right now. It's probably not happening. So I'm just tossing out the idea of tabling this and then addressing it as soon as possible in November, possibly in December, when the experts have told us what we should and shouldn't be doing with these heavy boats.
Bill or Alex?
I hear you, Greg. And it certainly is, it's worth considering. Wakes are an issue, and the boats keep getting larger and larger due to the popularity really of wake surfing in particular, which isn't allowed. And I do think we need to do something. I actually believe the POA is taking action and has through the study and other things to do that. And I have believed for a while, at least for the last couple of years, because of manufacturers, you know, they're creating these large boats, that we do need to have a weight limit. I don't know what the right number is. And I think that's what we're waiting to hear. And I think, is that what you're saying, Greg, is basically wait until we get that feedback from the study? So if I can ask a question, Eric, when we get this study from, because it was a wake study we commissioned with this consultant, does that provide some feedback on weight, and or will it also give us guidance on the weight of the boat? Can you give us a little more insight on that?
Anything else?
And when we interviewed him, it was generally agreed that the conclusion would be less than this. And I reviewed the proposal and our contract with him and some emails this week. And one of the conversations, one of the email conversations we had was that he was aware of an ordinance where some city in Oregon passed 4,800 pounds. And so it's definitely headed to be less, but my input again would be a ceiling is better than no ceiling until we figure it out. But, you know, it's 6 of one, half dozen of another, I guess.
One last question on that. In addition to weight, the other issue is that a lot of these boats have ballast tanks. And is that, so when we get this study back from him, will it address both not only the boat weight and so forth, but the size of the wakes and things like that? I mean, just if you can give us a little more insight, that'd be helpful.
Not necessarily. This is kind of a dry weight rule, and we already don't allow wake enhancement on the main lake, so.
So my comments on this, going back to when this was done with last year's board, it was a placeholder. And the main purpose is right now, while boating season is over-ish, it's still warm weather. And while we wait for the study, that could lead to another 28-degree that leads to, you know, this could be something that the approval comes in January or February. In that time, someone could go out and purchase a 6,500 pound boat or even larger than that. The newer electric boats, and I heard some are out there, could weigh upwards of 10,000. So someone who's going to do, you know, everything, although it might cost a heck of a lot more to charge it, but with gas going up, that's always a real possibility. So this rule certainly could be changed in the future once we get the report, especially this board is going to have to listen to an expert, or should strongly consider what an expert has to say. But right now there's zero limit versus that's my biggest concern. So I'll leave it at that. Any more discussion?
In addition to the comment on weight, I do like in here a lot of the red lines. We've changed, it may be a subtle one, but we've changed guidelines to rules. I believe that gives it more structure and bite, if you will, and more consistency. So I think those ones are good. The only question I had to do with the weight, and I've heard all the perspectives now, so I don't have any further comments.
All right, so with that, you're good, Alex? All right, just making sure. All those in favor of approving revised rule LM 7.2, no boats permitted over 21 feet, 6 inches, or 6,000 pounds, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
4 in favor, 1 absent, motion carried.
Thank you, Harmony. And Amanda, back to you.
This is the last one. This is an approval for GR 2.9, no malicious mischief. And this rule was actually presented at our special meeting at the end of August, which is why we're only approving it now. And this rule really is to try and deter the increase in vandalism that the community has been experiencing by holding those that participate and encourage vandalism accountable as well, and the responsible prime members who invite them into the community. So it's being recommended that the Board of Directors approve to revise Rule GR 2.9 as attached.
Thank you, Amanda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, discussion. Excellent. All in favor of approving GR 2.9, no malicious mischief, say aye.
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 4 in favor, 1 absent, motion carried.
Thank you, Harmony. Thank you, Amanda. And now we're going to move on to 8.13. Lynn?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. All right, so this action item is the annual request for the 2023 Water Sports Clubs calendar request and lake use variance rules request. So background on this, annually the 3 Canyon Lake Water Sports Clubs, Ski Club, SoCal Skiers, and Wakeboard Club request to schedule events on the North Lake and Jump Lagoon areas for club practices, events, and competition. The use of these areas for the club events and competition require approval by the board. So there's a couple of comments in here. We made some modifications separate from the recently approved lake use policy. For the 2023 calendar requests, there are these special exceptions requested by the clubs. So the 3 clubs got together, picked out their dates, and you'll see that on the attached calendar. During the blacked out months of Memorial Day to Labor Day, the Ski Club is requesting to host an annual community Learn to Ride Day on Monday, July 15th. This is a proposed date. They are not requesting a closure of the North Ski area, only to allow this event to be scheduled. Also on 3 Sundays during the blocked out months, the SoCal Skiers are requesting 3 practice dates in the Jump Lagoon to practice for upcoming events. And lastly, in the month of September, due to the holiday and availability for the clubs to host their requested events, it's requested the board allow dates requested as per the attached calendar. And then in addition are the attached rule variances. It is recommended the Board of Directors approve, reject the 2023 Water Sports Club calendar requests and lake use variances as attached, contingent upon the club sanctioning approval. So we're still getting the applications in for all the clubs for this next 3-year cycle. So we did include that in there, and we have talked to the clubs that they need to get that information also to us. So should the board approve it, it would be contingent upon that as well. Any questions?
Thank you, Lynn. Any questions at all for Lynn?
No questions, just a comment. I want to commend Lynn, you and the Activities Department for doing this. I know this is a point of a lot of discussion from a lot of groups interested in those waterways, and doing this now helps them make their planning and schedule their tournaments and stuff, which in some cases require national coordination. So thank you, and thanks to the team that got this resolved, it looks like, to the satisfaction of all parties.
Yes, and we have to give kudos to the clubs because this year they really worked together and made it very easy for staff. So thank you. I know Scott's here. Kevin's part of the clubs, I believe, also. So that was a big help to us because normally this takes a few months. So thank you.
And one thing just to point out for all clubs, especially for this one, if there's any other variances as the events get closer, or you look at the list and you realize we missed that one, we need to add it, just please let us know so we can approve that and we can just get it on the next agenda. Even as next year rolls around, I mean, March may come up right before you're about to do something, please just let us know. Because I want to make sure that you have the most successful events possible here, okay? Any other comments? All right, is there a motion to approve? Did I already do that?
Motion.
There we go. Second?
Second.
All right. No more discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the 2023 Water Sports Club calendar request and Lake East Rules Variance request, say aye.
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 4 in favor, 1 absent, motion carried.
Thank you, Harmony. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you to all our clubs. And side note, if you ever get a chance to watch these competitions, it is fantastic. So I highly recommend that. We're going to go on to association reports. Eric, you're up.
Good evening. Hope everybody made it out to the car show. I think it was probably our best car show ever. I think it was the 16th. Probably my favorite event, and Bob was there with his car. Greg was there with his car. A fantastic assortment of cars. It was really great day. It always is. So that was exciting. Great job by our operations team and our activities team. Lynn was there all day long. Thank you, Lynn. Lodge staff was working hard. Everybody works hard to put these events on, and really proud of these community events, and so much work goes into those. So I hope everybody appreciates it. Quickly, our RFP, the request for proposals for the Canyon Lake Drive South medians is out on the street for bid. And we will be taking out the pine trees that have been there far too long and are doing damage to the streets and the curbs, and installing professionally designed landscaping and uplighting, and it'll be a vast improvement over what's there, and really upgrade the entrance to Canyon Lake from the main gate. And so we look forward to getting bids for that and then presenting the cost to the board, and hopefully the board will approve that and we'll get going on that project. We have had some issues. We installed POA card readers at the gates, and we're having issues with our supplier and our Dwelling Live vendor. Turns out there's some incompatible firmware, and basically causing glitches that we have to rely on our supplier to solve. And so we've had problems with those card readers that we hope to work out soon, but vendors being pretty difficult. And so we're doing everything we can to get those working, but they're not making it easy. We've also had a gate operator down at the main gate for some time, and global supply chain issues. The lead time on some of these parts is just ridiculous. And so we apologize for that, but we're working to get that resolved as soon as possible. And we're also stocking up on a larger supply of spare parts so that we don't have that issue again. It's hard to get virtually everything right now still. The good news, the country club patio, we have a shade structure designed, a cable type structure with a folding, it can fold up out of the way or be expanded for full coverage or partial coverage as we need. The installation of that project will start next Tuesday. We're also going to be doing some other things during our overseating closure of the country club, and that's one of the big ones that we're doing this year. Our mailbox slab project, we have 100 mailbox clusters throughout the community. We have about 28 of the 100 left, and some of the 28 that are left are challenging. Not really enough room to do what we need to do, and so we didn't save the hardest ones for last, but it's seeming like it's turning out that way. So we're working our way through the last 28 or 30 of those. Our solar project, you may have seen if you've been down by the tennis courts, we have a gated area fenced off over near the tennis courts. The solar panels have been delivered, and some of the parts have been delivered, and our vendor has received permits from the city for the 3 locations, and installation should start soon. And that's a project we look forward to being done this year. The pickleball, 2 more pickleball courts have been designed and are currently at the city in the process of being plan checked. And so when we get a permit for that and have worked through all the requirements the city has, We will put that project out to bid. And once we have bids, we will present those costs to the board. And if the board approves that, that's another project that would probably happen in 2023. Again, that's subject to the bids we receive and the board approving the project. Down by the tennis courts, for years, we've talked about some kind of improvement in the dirt area near the restroom. Right now, there's some very old slab and some old picnic tables and a retaining wall. There's been literally 5 or 6 different designs kicked around for probably the last 10 years. Actually, about $200,000 have been spent over the last 10 years talking about and paying people to design things that never got built, which is really a shame. And so we're hoping to finally do something with that piece of land. And if you've been to Indian Beach or Sierra Park West, we have 2 new shade structures at each of those parks with a really nice picnic area underneath. And so right now our goal is to construct something like that in that area. Steve is currently working on the design for that. He designed the one at Sierra Park and the one at Indian Beach. They came out fantastic. So great job, Steve. And so he did such a good job. We asked him to do something, come up with something similar for the tennis courts. So he's working on that. We'll put that out to bid. We'll get some costs for that. We'll present those costs to the board. And if the board approves that, that's something else we would be doing in 2023. So we got a lot of potential projects coming. We're also working with our pavement engineering company, GMU, that designed and helped oversee the pavement project, the year 1 pavement project this year. We've executed an agreement with them, and they're currently working on year 2 project, which should be a $6 to $7 million project, doing another 1.4 million square feet of road reconstruction. So that's happening in the background. When those plans and specs are ready, we will be putting that out to bid and hopefully awarding a contract to do that work. And as Renee mentioned, Vacation Park is virtually done except for the playground from Miracle Playground, which they originally told us we should have that in August. Then they told us you'll have it in November. We checked with them again and they said, no, now it's December. And they're pushing really hard to get it back to November. So supply chain is a real issue. And everywhere we turn, we're having supply issues. So we're pushing them hard to get it in November. Same thing for the exercise equipment that goes along the pathway. We'll get that installed when it gets here. And when both of those are done, we'll have a grand opening. So stay tuned. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Just a few things on your list. Oh my goodness. And thank you, Steve, too, for all your hard work. We appreciate it. We're going to go on to board comments. Now that you're back from your amazing trip, Bill, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I got back late Saturday night and I've been gone for the last month and missing a number of great activities. I'm sorry I missed those. They're always good. The 9/11 event, the car show just this past weekend, and the Harbor Fest all sounded great. So while I missed that, I'm glad to be back and look forward to more fun in Canyon Lake.
I'll go down the line. Greg?
Yes, I had a great week last week. I attended my first ACC meeting, and I'd heard going into that meeting, and you mentioned earlier tonight that, well, this is the hardest working committee in Canyon Lake. So I wanted to see if that was true, and I'll tell you, I came away absolutely convinced that that's true. Now, what that means is that not only are they on top of their game in terms of what their duties are and their charge, but they put in more hours than I believe any other committee, thus the term hardest working committee. But I was very, very impressed. If I'm not mistaken, in the past couple of weeks, they've issued over 100 permits each week for applications for approval by the committee. So they're very busy people. They're very dedicated. And I'll tell you, I came away very impressed, and you should all be very proud of them. The second thing I did, of course, Eric mentioned, I went to the car show. I was in the car show, but people ask me, well, how's it going being on the board? And oftentimes my answer is this. My answer is, well, since I got on the board, I've grown a new set of eyes because I look at things differently now than when I was a normal citizen. And with respect to the car show and all of those other activities that we have, pulling off that car show is a major, major feat. Now, it started off, I think on Thursday, I was visiting Carrie in her office, and her office was filled with these boxes full of signs. Go this way, and all those signs have to be taken out early in the morning on Saturday, posted at some ungodly hour to tell people where to go and how to get there. And it's just amazing the coordination that this takes. And between the car club and the operations people, the car show went off like glass. So again, my eyes were, when I was at the show, walking around, looking at all the signs, all the cones were properly placed, the trash cans. That's a lot of work. And it went off like clockwork. So I'm very proud of them, very happy of them, and I hope you are very appreciative of what they do. Thanks.
Well, since this is my second board meeting, the last month I've been very fortunate to sit in a Estates Committee, Rules and Regulations Committee, Rec Committee, and Appeals Committee. It's been very educational. I haven't jumped into ACC. I'm not sure I'm ready to jump in that pool yet, but I'm getting there. My goal was really to meet the people of the committees and who were the volunteers that have been running these committees, was really my number one goal, which was really great. I'm just going to jump on the car show thing. If you guys have not been to the car show, it was incredible. Staff was here by 3:30 in the morning, setting up those cones and doing everything. 3:30 in the morning on a Saturday is not fun for anybody. So I just want to thank the staff. I mean, just incredible show. The level of cars was top notch across the board. So the best car show I've ever seen for how many great cars there were. Bob, even your station wagon. Yeah, those Buicks, baby.
I forgot to mention the two wagon guys were parked one car apart with another wagon right in between them. So they happen to have the same car.
I was lucky enough last week also with Renee to tour EVMWD water treatment facility. We got to tour the dam and see all the upgrades that they're putting together. And we also got to go see the wastewater treatment plant and see how they reclaim all that water and make it recyclable so we could use it on our golf course. It was very educational. I think Darcy's had a fun fact earlier today. My fun fact was our water district is pretty incredible. We have currently around a 7% loss in water from the moment they purchase it to it gets to your meter. It seemed high to me, and then I started reaching around, and there's municipalities that are as high as 25% water loss. So props to them to only being 7% water loss from that point. And that's recycling, water leaks, and so forth. And then the last thing I really want to say, for everybody, if you guys have not gotten to know our staff here, they're incredible. Some of the best employees and people that I've ever met, and I've been around all of them for some of them a long, long time. But they're incredible people. They work hard and they care about their job and they care about this community. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Well, you already hit on the time for the car show. I couldn't believe, I know one staffer who started, I think it was 4:30 in the morning to be out there. It was an incredible car show. A lot of fun to be a judge. So thank you so much to the car club and the POA. It was fantastic. I also want to thank Darcy for the tour. I won't go on that, but, yeah, you already hit all the great points, Alex, but it was phenomenal. Tim, who's not here, he wanted me to make sure that we thanked the Guild for Harbor Fest and that amazing concert. They were out super early in the morning. They were setting up actually days before, and they were out there at 7:30 in the morning, making sure we had an amazing free concert for everyone. Of course, operations crushed it as they always do, making sure that everything was clean and picked up. Same with our activities team. Everyone is just phenomenal. So some upcoming events. And I have to ask, is there anyone here from the clans? All right, Joe, because I want to make sure everyone knows this Saturday, they're having a barbecue. It's one of their larger fundraisers. It's at Holiday Harbor. Tickets are $40. You can get it at the door or at the park. They're going to have a country band there. I want you to look up the details. I feel like it starts at 6, but don't quote me on that. But that's a great event that's happening. The following Saturday, Junior Women's Club is having a Rocktoberfest event. It's another fundraiser happening. And all these clubs that do these fundraisers are raising money simply to give it back to the community. So great opportunities to have an enjoyable time in Canyon Lake and help raise funds that go back into individuals who are suffering or other items that are needed within the lake. So with that, yeah, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. With that, I thank everyone for being here. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.